The COVID-19 vaccine has been kicking my ass lately, and I wanted to write something relatively light before an upcoming video that I've got scheduled, so I'm going to briefly touch on something that comes up a lot in my videos, especially recently, and will also show up in my next video. I want to talk about catharsis in entertainment. Oh, and mild spoilers for the following. If you have followed me at all ever since I moved away from short reviews and towards bigger essays, you probably know that I am drawn to entertainment that has some sort of subtextual meaning, and that often branches out into media that appeals to me at certain emotional points, sometimes related to politics, but hopefully more often not as the years progress. Hopefully. Most of the games in the DQP's Faves collection are there because they either helped shape who I am as an entertainment purveyor, or because they came at a profound moment and helped me come to better understand my own feelings. Like, for example, Disco Elysium came into my life at a point where politics were just becoming too much to emotionally deal with, as they often are for most everyone these days. And it offered a humorous and well-written playground in which to explore that political exhaustion. This ties into an idea that I got fabulously wrong in my video essay on Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater. Metal Gear Solid 3 is, in spite of its James Bond parody tone, a tragedy. It is a story in which a great and legendary hero suffers a catastrophic emotional downfall from which he struggles for the entire rest of the series to recover. In that video essay, I explored what made that appealing to me, its relationship to and deconstruction of many of the tropes that make 007's older adventures so rough and cheesy to watch nowadays. Naked Snake's downfall occurs because he is full of good ol' horny secret agent machismo, and the game's ending sets him down a dark path that leads to him committing atrocities and threatening the very country he once served. In that essay, I brought up Aristotle's guidelines on tragedy, and I admittedly flubbed one of those guidelines up in my analysis of the game, and yes, I am going to repeat this in my next video for posterity's sake. The audience must feel some sort of catharsis when the tragedy occurs. We should feel relieved. I kind of brushed over this point in that video, even though it's the crux of why people watch tragedies in the first place. So we should probably define what, in a literary sense, catharsis even means. Catharsis is derived from the Greek word, well, katharsis, which means a purgation or purification. Aristotle had used the term in terms of tragedy because they evoke terror and pity in the audience, thus allowing the audience to feel a clarification of their emotional state. It serves as a way for the audience to better understand themselves and the horrific feelings that the story is evoking in front of their eyes. Quoting the Encyclopedia Britannica, the interpretation generally accepted is that through experiencing fear vicariously in a controlled situation, the spectator's own anxieties are directed outward, and through sympathetic identification with the tragic protagonist, his insight and outlook are enlarged. Tragedy, then, has a healthful and humanizing effect on the spectator or reader. What you're watching in the background right now is one of my personal favorite examples of a tragic scene evoking terror and pity in this sense, even though the movie it's from isn't strictly a tragedy altogether. Shin Godzilla is a film that uses its imagery to explicitly evoke the 2011 Tohoku earthquake and tsunami, and the government's response to it. Everything about Godzilla's destruction is meant to trigger a lot of the same feelings of disorientation and terrifying awe that such a devastating natural event can cause in real life. And of course, this is an extension of the feelings that the original Gojira evoked in 1954. That film's monster was created to evoke the fear of nuclear holocaust, particularly in Japan, where memories of the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were still fresh in audiences' minds. I first watched Shin Godzilla not long after a 7.1 magnitude earthquake hit my hometown of Anchorage, Alaska. It obviously was not as catastrophic as the 2011 9.0 magnitude earthquake in Japan, but it still left an impact on my psyche, largely because the building I was in at the time was among the most visibly damaged. My workspace had completely fallen apart, the hallways outside were flooded, and I heard glass loudly shatter as it hit. Future aftershocks caused physical fight or flight reactions in me that persist in smaller earthquakes to this day. As such, when I group watched Shin Godzilla a few months later, it helped me process a lot of what was going through my head at the time. It evoked a lot of the same feelings of terror that the 2018 earthquake had, and as such, it proved a helpful and controllable way to handle and practice a lot of those feelings. I went back and rewatched the atomic breath scene a lot in the months following the earthquake, as aftershocks continued to rock Anchorage up until, well, now. It's a scene that always makes me feel small and helpless in the face of forces outside of my control, which, well, is exactly how I felt huddled under my work desk holding on for dear life. You might think it counterintuitive to revisit those stressful feelings so often after a traumatic event, but it proved to be a helpful way to help me process those feelings so that when future aftershocks hit, they wouldn't absolutely devastate me like they did during the big one. And of course, this kind of catharsis influences creators just as much as it does people who watch and play and read all that. I mentioned at the beginning of this video that a lot of my video essays, especially recently, are reflective of how entertainment helps me process complicated feelings and emotions. That influences my creative process, and oftentimes creating can be just as helpful in processing this stuff as just wrapping myself in a blanket and watching the same movie over and over again. Sometimes a work just exists because its creator wanted to get their feelings out into the open. Zack Snyder, love him or hate him,
men get arrested. Dogs get put down.
Dedicated the recent 4-hour-long cut of Justice League to his late daughter, and the movie pretty obviously helped Zack process that loss in his life. That's not an opinion, that's something he stated in an interview. It's just, we make movies, so that's the way we express. If I was a cabinet maker or something, I would have made chairs and a table to sort of figure out how to get through this grief and get through this relationship that I'm having with life and death and everything. But we make movies, so you get a big movie out of it. This is just what it is. Justice League is an especially weird case because it was largely written and filmed before Snyder's personal tragedy, but you can sense in the way it was recut that it provided an outlet for Snyder's grief. I mean, we've always known that the guy's not a subtle filmmaker. That's catharsis, a purification of an audience and/or creator's emotions. It is not necessarily a relief or schadenfreude, but a processing, a clarification. My next two videos are going to be about a film and a TV series, respectively, that I have fallen back on a lot over the past year or so, similar to the Shin Godzilla example above. Their simultaneous goofiness and presentness gave me a safe, fun space where I could purposefully intensify and process a lot of the stress that was, and still is, going through my head after scary news stories both late last year and early this year. See y'all on May the 4th.